Hello and welcome to this edition of Talking SUPs. In this episode, we're going to be talking to two local policymakers about single-use plastics and how we can make progress on other issues around climate change. And to go through this absolutely critical issue, we have Sinn Féin's environment spokesperson, Philip McGuigan, and we have the Alliance Party's Kate Nicholl, who is also the chair of the all-party group on climate change. Kate and Philip, you're both very welcome to this edition of Talking SUPs.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with you. Kate, how did you get interested in this issue of, single-use plastics, fast fashion? I mean, people may not be aware when you were Lord Mayor of Belfast just a few months ago, you took a real interest in that aspect of this issue. So what was it that got you interested?
I think I've always been interested in nature and the environment. My real interest in policy, I suppose, started when I worked for Anna Lowe years ago when she was chair of the Environment Committee. And back then, the conversations we had were really about convincing people climate change was a thing. So we've come on along a lot since then. For me, it's been an interest, but the real kind of motivation and driving force for it has been since I've had children. Just the idea of my kids growing up in a natureless future is really, really distressing. And obviously I was born in Zimbabwe and I lived there till I was 12. And the people who are most impacted by climate change, climate breakdown are people who live in countries like Zimbabwe who are least responsible, but who face the biggest price. So I think that obviously big business, government is largely responsible, but I think people taking individual action is really important for keeping it on the agenda. And that was really what I tried to do as Lord Mayor.
Okay. And Philip, just for you as well, I mean, people maybe aware, it was around about this time last year, we were getting geared up for the COP26 conference. And for anyone who was watching social media at the time, they may be aware that you went. That you cycled over, you made the point of trying to make an environmentally friendly trip. So what was it that got you interested in the issues of climate change and issues like single-use plastics?
I think for any politician, climate change has to be the biggest issue of the day. I got involved in politics a long time ago to try and bring about change, positive change for people. So, in this environment where we're sitting in 2022, for me, the biggest single change that I can help as a policymaker bring about is with regard to our environment, with regard to climate change. Kate's obviously very much younger than me. I've a grandchild, and when I'm out, I'm concerned about her future, about what kind of an environment. And every night when we're watching the news, we're seeing some devastating impact, whether it's locally or across the globe, with regard to climate change. So, obviously politicians have a big responsibility, individuals have a big responsibility, and we need to make legislation and laws that allow for people to do the individual actions that they want to do to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate, just on it, because Philip's tied in very nicely. Why do MLAs need to be taking this seriously? Well, not just MLAs. I appreciate you're a former local councillor as well before that. But why do policymakers need to take this issue seriously? Because a few people may be listening to this and going, yeah, it's all well and good, but why do we need to take action? So what would be your response to that?
It's critical, and it's everything. It impacts everything. You look at the cost of living, you look at quality of water, you look at all these different things. It's here. It's not some abstract idea. Climate breakdown is impacting all of our lives already. So we have to take action. I think probably what's really important to stress is that we have to take it seriously. Chris Stark recently commented on how a lot of politicians in Northern Ireland think because we finally have the Climate Change Act, we finally have devolved legislation, which we never thought we'd have for such a long time, but that's the job done, and it's not. That's just the beginning. And so it's really important that politicians like ourselves are really driving the change that's needed. We've set these targets, but now the departments have to set the plans of how we're going to achieve that. And with the absence of an assembly, without real political will, I think there are people within each political party who do care passionately about this, but often it just feels like it's tokenism. And it can't be tokenism. We really need meaningful change. And so how you force politicians to take it seriously is the public really weighing in on this and making it a priority. I remember Belfast journalists telling me that it's really quite worrying when you look at the analytics of articles that cover issues about environment. They're very low, they're not clicked on. And so it sometimes feels like there's not that pressure for politicians to really push this. We really need the voters to be forcing us to do so.
Okay, and Philip, same question to you. Why do you think MLAs need to be taking this seriously in terms of the chamber? I know you were present. Kate mentioned the Climate Change Act there. I know you were present in the chamber during many of those long debates as you tried to hammer through the different amendments that were there. So why should MLAs be taking this issue seriously?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that it's this crisis affecting the way we live, I think the fact that we have the Climate Act now here in the North means that MLAs will certainly be forced into taking it seriously if they didn't before. I mean, whenever we get an executive up and running, I would imagine, the short-term issue of dealing with the cost of living crisis, the medium-term issue of transforming our health service will be key, but climate change and dealing with the targets within the Climate Act will be up there as well. The hard work, as Kate said, really hasn't begun, because we've got the template, but we now need to path and plot that path where all aspects of government transform and change. I mean, one of the things that really kind of bugged me during the whole discussion on the climate bill was it was all couched in negativity, or a lot of it was couched in negativity instead of the positivity. What we're trying to do is provide a future for our grandchildren, but there are many, many opportunities that, for business, for society, for communities, that will bring about positive change for people living here in the North, not alone within health. Sometimes politicians take easy policy decisions, because it maybe meets the public demand at that particular occasion. I think with the climate bill moving towards 2050, we have an opportunity here in Stormont to actually look sensibly at things that will have long-term positive impacts. I mean, I'm a keen cyclist. You mentioned that. I've always described the bicycle as, the golden bullet. One of the things that really disappointed me from a policy point of view, when I look at how other cities and big towns did affect real positive change through the whole COVID pandemic in terms of transforming their infrastructure and their transport, we really did not take advantage of that. Now, that's something that will have a positive impact on climate change, and it's something that we will have to do, but it's also something that will save our environment, will help reduce investment needed in the health service, will help the health of our children. We have an obesity crisis here. So all of these things, I think we need to change the narrative from the negative to the positive. And I think that's something that we're maybe not very good at doing here in the North.
Brilliant. And I think you're absolutely right about that in terms of how we frame the conversations on this. And Kate, just on that, I mean, in terms of, how engaged the public are, I know you were talking a wee bit there about, kind of public engagement with the media on environmental issues. But when you were Lord Mayor, obviously you're in a very public role, and now you're an MLA. When you were talking about things like fast fashion, and I know Belfast City Council has tried to do things around single-use plastics. I mean, did you find that the public are engaged on this, that the public are appreciative of that action and want to learn more?
Yeah, I think it's changing. And I think there are different demographics. So we know that the younger generation are fully engaged on this. Some of the most terrifying conversations I had when I was Lord Mayor were with the young climate activists who are asking exactly where the roadmap was to net zero. And it wasn't good enough that I was buying £10 dresses online and wearing them to meet the Mayor of Dublin. They wanted to know exactly what the targets were and where the investment was in solar energy. And so I think that, yes, the younger generation really invested in this, and understandably so. It's their future. It's their birthrights that we've been squandering. I think there is still a lot of work to do with other demographics, but that's our job. We know the science, we know what's needed. It's not enough to say that climate change is really serious and we all need to take action. We need to make it easier for people to make the right decision. Sorry, that's a Tane in the background making noise. So there are a number of things, and Philip is so right about cycling. You know, so many people would love to cycle, but it's not safe to do so because the infrastructure is appalling. So if we want more people on their bikes, we need to invest in that. We need good, safe cycle lanes. So yeah, I think the conversation is important, but really it's up to us to make the decisions for people easier.
Yeah. And Philip, just on you, same question. I mean, how engaged do you find the public are when you're talking about these issues? You know, whenever climate bill is being passed, did you find the public were engaged, were talking about it, and were pressing for meaningful action?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly something that people are acutely aware of now, because, as I say, you can't really watch local news or international news on a daily basis without, you know, seeing flash floods or droughts or some impact of global warming. So people are certainly engaged. Young people in particular are very aware of it, engaged, and because they recognise that this is their future. One of the things that I suppose, you know, it's an evolving argument. So, I mean, even as a policymaker myself, you know, somebody even brought forward or was bringing forward a single-use plastic bill, someone who's involved in the climate bill debate, you know, there are things that I'm not aware of that, you know, you think you're maybe making the right decision, and then, you know, someday somebody tells you something and you realize, well, you know, I'm not. I mean, for example, I try my best to have this reusable coffee cup with me, but, you know, and that wasn't always the case. I used to always look out for recyclable coffee cups, and was doing that for a period of time. And then I realized, because somebody told me, informed me, that, you know, only 1 in every 400 coffee cups, even though they may be technically able to be recycled, are actually recycled. You know, so, you know, there are many arguments that people are coming to. Knowledge is opening up on it. So I think the community are engaged. I mean, in terms of single-use plastics, you know, I suppose it's 50-50, because, like, yesterday I cycled 55 miles. I represent North Antrim. It's, in my eyes, the most beautiful constituency on this island. I was able to go down through the glens of Antrim and along the north coast, and that's beautiful scenery, but it's always spoiled by the amount of litter on every grass verge, on every country road, on every main road across the north, and that's something that really disappoints me. And no, you know, it disappoints me that people think that it's acceptable to throw their cans, their plastic bottles, their polystyrene food packages out the window of their car or their van. So, I mean, I think, you know, there's certainly a lot that we can improve on here in terms of educating the public on what they should or shouldn't be doing.
Brilliant. And Kate, just on that, so I mean, I know we've talked a wee bit about, you know, the Climate Change Act, and I know it was good to hear that some of the younger people were talking to you about actions to be taken, because there is a bit of a sense that once the Climate Act was passed, there's a bit of fear that people would go, all right, box tick, job done. Where do we need to go from here? I know you alluded a wee bit to that, but if you could just elaborate a wee bit more about where do we need to go from here after the Climate Act?
Well, I mean, the Climate Act sets out certain milestones that need to be met. So with the first milestone is in 18 months. By the end of 2023, DERA need to have set out their plans for the first three carbon budgets to the Assembly. And they've got to consult on that. There's the commission that needs to be set up. There are a number of kind of key milestones that need to be met, and we have no Assembly, and we have no DERA committee really scrutinizing any of this. So it's very concerning. I'm the new chair of the all-party group on climate action, and my intention is really to operate this as an ad hoc committee in the meantime, taking evidence from stakeholders and focusing on those key things. But yeah, there's a number of things that need to be done. The secondary legislation that's now required as well in relation to section 42 of the Act. So there's so much that needs to be done, and we really need the Assembly up and running so that we can progress this.
Okay, and Philip, same issue to you. I know you've proposed a private members bill around single-use plastics, but where do we need to go as well alongside that after the Climate Change Act was passed?
Well, I think we need to, obviously, in an executive, and we need to inject urgency. The single-use plastic bill from the EU should have been simply transposed here in the north. I shouldn't have to be bringing forward, or anybody proposing, a single-use plastic bill. It should just be common sense. But we also need to take action with regard to the Climate Act. There will be proposals and plans within each sector, that's clear. We need to start discussing those, making targets, and then devising how we will reach those targets. And that's across, agriculture was the big talking point. But this is about much more than this. This is about our energy market, and who could argue in the current climate of huge energy price increases that we shouldn't try and have control of our own electricity market. We can do that here on this island with onshore and offshore wind farms. We need to ramp up that. It will bring a bit of security in terms of energy supply, but also a bit of security in terms of the cost to people. We need to look at retrofitting our public housing stock. That's something where, particularly coming into the winter, could play huge dividends in terms of saving energy and providing heat for people, particularly the most vulnerable who need it. We need to look at our transport. We will have targets, no doubt, where by 2025 or 2030 we will no longer have diesel or petrol cars. Our electric vehicle infrastructure here on this island, never mind the north, is far short of what it needs to be. So we need to look at that. So we just need to invest right across every sector, send a signal to business out there that we're serious about this, and allow them to invest, because a lot of this is going to be require private investment.
Yeah, and obviously we're at the start of this mandate, so all things being equal, if by the time we get to the next assembly election in about 4 years' time, Kate, where would you like to see? What would you like to see by the time you go around the doors again? And if you're seeking another mandate to get back to the assembly, what would you like to be able to say this previous assembly achieved on issues around climate and single-use plastics in this mandate?
I'd like to say that we delivered on all these things that we said that we would, that this is an assembly that for a long time was lagging behind, but now is leading the way in ambition and seeing it as an opportunity. We're amazingly privileged when you think of where we are, this windy island, and our natural resources. But there are a lot of things that we forget, that the island of Ireland should really be like a jungle. I was at a very interesting talk where they were saying people will reflect on the beauty of the Mournes. The Mournes should actually be jungle. That's what the climate should really be like. And there's so many things that have happened, but I would love to see more of a push towards reforestation, rewilding, really just enhancing and embracing our nature and prioritizing it. And I think that there is a lot of hope, because there is a new generation of politicians that are coming through. There are new voices in this assembly, and I am optimistic when we're given that opportunity that we can really drive change, but also do it in partnership with stakeholders. Because while politicians may not have the vision or the ambition necessarily, we know that we have incredible stakeholders, organizations like Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, who are really leading that. And we don't have to come up with the ideas; they're there. We just need to implement them.
And Philip, same question to you. I'll give the last word to you on this. About at the end of this current mandate, what would be your hope that you'd be able to say this assembly achieved on these issues?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have attainable action plans for the first number of years for the climate bill, and we're repurposing our economy and heading in that direction of the green growth that we always talk about. Single-use plastics is obviously a subset of the bigger discussion. For example, I think it would be inconceivable that we don't have a ban on single-use plastics in this mandate, early in this mandate. I think plastics, I suppose, plastics has only been around for 65 years, but and it probably revolutioned the way we live. But for those last 10, 15 years, we now recognise the harmful effect. So we need to deal with that. Far too many of us live our lives dependent on plastics, but government needs to be the leader. We need to repurpose legislation so that polluter pays, that we ban certain types of plastics and that we reduce other types of plastics. And then we have to look at maybe our whole waste management strategy. A lot of people think that they're doing really good. I mean, I'm a zealot when it comes to recycling, but maybe we need a bigger conversation about where actually all the products in our blue bin end up. The other thing that we need to see is a deposit return scheme. I talked about the amount of litter along our roadsides and our towns and our centres. A deposit return scheme isn't going to be the silver bullet in that, but it certainly would reduce the amount of tin cans, plastic bottles and glass bottles. So I think those are two, reduction and ban of single-use plastics and a workable deposit return scheme are two very, very clear-cut things that we need to see very early in the mandate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, that was a fascinating conversation. I know we've only just scratched the surface of a very big issue, but Kate and Philip, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and taking the time to speak to us here on Talking SUPs.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talking SUPs. Please remember to hit the subscribe button so that you can keep up to date with all future episodes from this series. Thank you for watching.